there isn't any more question in my mind with the new information that's come out that essentially the Secret Service was trying to assassinate Donald Trump. And no, before any random person sees this video, I'm not pro-Trump. I'm very much anti-Trump. But I am fairly certain that they were trying to get him killed. Okay. It has now come out that the Secret Service knew for an hour that Crooks was there, the guy who shot Trump. Or, well, the story is that he didn't shoot Trump. He tried to shoot Trump, and that was actually a piece of glass from the teleprompter that actually hit his ear. The fact that a guy with a gun who was noticed by the Secret Service, nobody did anything for an hour, boggles the mind. This is not incompetence. And people have suggested this, that just the Secret Service just sucks. That they just didn't do their job that day. I don't believe that for a second. People who are that well-trained of a professional just don't make mistakes like that. Nobody makes a mistake like that unless they would be like literally having no idea how to do the job. And that is not the case. I am absolutely certain that this was a legitimately planned assassination attempt. Now, I don't believe Crooks was hired by the Secret Service or the CIA in order to assassinate him. I believe he did act on his own. But that from the records that the police now have a hold of from his internet searches, he wasn't just targeting Trump. He was targeting a lot of politicians. He had Googled where a lot of them lived and how to get at them. It just happens to be that Trump was the one close enough to him in order to be able to get. What I believe is that he did act on his own, but that the normal security caution that, should have been there, called the Secret Service, just stood down and tried to let it happen. Because there's no way he was just alone on that rooftop right across from the president and no Secret Service were on it. There is no way that you could reasonably believe that they just forgot to put somebody on that roof. There are people now in the crowd testifying that they saw him up there on the roof. If the damn civilians in the crowd could see him up there, then the Secret Service saw him up there. And as the records have shown, yes, they did. They did see him there, but chose to do nothing for an hour and didn't act until he fired a shot. So all that time he was lying there, prone, lining up his shot. At no point did they think to fire and stop him. And I believe the reason for that is because they were told not to. They were told not to act. Because he was supposed to come in and do that. They were letting it happen. Now, this isn't the first time this has happened. There have been a lot of political assassinations in the U.S. and even around the world too, where genuinely, where was security when all this was happening? Just mysteriously was not there doing their job. And when you want to know whether or not someone was assassinated and who did it, take a look at who had the authority to call off the regular amount of security that should have been there. And I think that's probably going to tell you everything. I deeply do believe that the CIA was trying to get him killed. Not necessarily do it themselves, but they knew that something like this was coming. They saw him coming and stood down and tried to let it happen. In fact, I actually wouldn't be surprised, even though there's no evidence of them possibly even maybe contacting him. I doubt it, but theoretically, it could be possible. Now, the question is, why would they let that happen, trying to get him killed. The fact is, Trump had proven from his first administration that he was completely and utterly incompetent at his job. How many times did that guy almost start a world war? He almost started one with Iran when he assassinated Qasem Soleimani. I believe truly that the CIA, or whoever it is that's higher up than the president or has the power to kill the president, intentionally, they know that for America to continue to function, people have to believe it's a democracy. It's very clearly an oligarchy, and Trump doesn't challenge that at all. But Trump has said so much about how he wants to basically get rid of democracy, become a dictator on day one, how he's going to use the legal apparatus to go after everybody who basically disagreed with him or anybody who didn't support him. There is a very real totalitarian strain directly through the man and directly through the Republican Party and directly through the conservative movement in general. It's completely totalitarian. In fact, you could almost accuse it of being a theocracy, although that's not really what a theocracy is, but you can see that. And I believe the CIA sees that is where he's a problem. The fact that he's incompetent at his job, not because he's against the globalists. And we know what you mean by the globalists. We know you mean Jews, and we know you mean the global homo conspiracy, because everything has to be a bloody conspiracy. And I realize that I'm saying that right after I just presented a conspiracy theory, but there's a difference between a theory that actually has some credibility to it and something you just pulled out of your ass because you're a homophobe and a religious nut. The only thing America, you can do anything you want to the American people and they will sit there and take it. The only thing you can't do is destroy the image that is a democracy. People still believe that. No matter what America has done in the hundreds of years of its existence, that was completely anti-democratic, completely anti-human life. I mean, if you're looking for the anti-life equation, just literally just look at U.S. politics, and you're right there. I mean, Darkseid doesn't even have to invade the earth. It's just right there. You can stop your search today. And people will continue to take it and will continue to suffer whatever the government does, no matter what. It doesn't matter what party. But that veneer of democracy is always enough, just enough to make sure people don't revolt in large numbers. Yeah, Black Lives Matter is okay because it's not really organized and not even attempting to take over the government or replace the system. They were just expressing anger at an injustice, one that needed to be addressed or it was going to cause further problems. The problem is the Trump people are doing the same thing that so-called socialists were doing with Bernie Sanders. Oh, don't worry. If we get our guy in, then it'll be all the same. We don't have to actually do the revolution thing. I mean, I said 8 years ago about Bernie's not going to win because they're not going to let him win because the system is literally designed to make sure that you can't actually replace the system. Literally every fucking thing that Marx ever wrote and that every Marxist ever wrote and then proceeded to prove in practice, but somehow just didn't apply to Bernie Sanders or just didn't apply to America because America's so fucking unique and special, right? And then all I ever got was attacked for pointing that out. And well, wow, what do you know? I was actually right because I listened to fucking Marx. I actually listened to actual Marxist theory while the rest of them were just pandering off to go as far up Bernie's ass as possible because it's totally going to change now. And for all that bullshit, conservatives are doing the exact same thing with Trump. Trump could not be more full of shit. Trump could not be more of a crook. He could not be any more incompetent at the job. He could not be any more of a racist, xenophobic, like just about anything you could possibly accuse him of. He already is. He even said that he could shoot somebody directly in the middle of the street in New York, and you people will still love me. And they cheered him for that. Because supporting that is still easier than doing a revolution, particularly when you saw what happened after January 6th. That was an attempted insurrection. And no one short of a fool or a liar could claim that it was anything but. And that's what I believe that really is the cope. The way leftists coped with Bernie Sanders is the way that conservatives are coping with Donald Trump. Anything to make sure they don't have to do any radical action, even though he's incentivizing it. He's pushing for it. He's calling for people to do it. And it's pretty obvious that he is because he's literally openly saying it. This is their cope. The same way Bernie Sanders was our cope. And I would not be surprised if a lot of the rhetoric of the stuff that the ruling class isn't going to do. They're not going to really just bring manufacturing back to America. It's not going to happen. It's economically not viable. You literally cannot do it due to the very phenomenon of the tendency of the rate of profit to fall, which is why everything was shipped to Mexico to begin with, and then later on to China. They didn't do it just because they were greedy and wanted it. They did it because they had to do it. You can look at any chart of the overall, the profitability of corporations and see that needed to be done in order to stave off the tendency of the rate of profit to fall, which also doesn't exist according to libertarians and most people who support capitalism, even though it's right there. So I definitely do believe with all of that. And when you consider how could Trump be like a guy who's really against the system, against the elite, when he's now literally being funded by them? Because the one thing he can do is do tax breaks. Cut taxes on the rich. Yeah, of course he'll do that. He already did it once. But I think that the CIA or whoever it is that's up high enough to be in that position knows that literally these capitalists are being self-destructive. They know that by supporting Trump, they're going to kill their own republic. But just by trying to get out their absolutely insane, deep profit motive, their own personal benefit to it. And that is something that is done in capitalism. They literally do not care as long as they get what they want. I mean, look how hard they deny global warming. That even if 98% of all climate scientists say, yes, it's very real and it's going to kill us, they will do whatever it is that they have to convince themselves that it's not real, to convince themselves it's some kind of a plot, just to defend their own money, to defend the wealth that they make off of fossil fuels, etc. So it doesn't seem impossible to me at all that that the capitalist class is literally just self-destructive by its own very drive for profit, which would kind of explain why the system continually goes into crisis. Because if they did, if they weren't inherently self-destructive, they wouldn't be supporting a system that did it to begin with. And I think that is the very essence here. The very essence of what it is that the bourgeois state is supposed to do. It's supposed to navigate the contradictions of capital, contradictions between members of the ruling class, to try to make a society work. That was always the point. Because there are competing interests among the elite. They're not some great monolithic entity that all thinks the same, as is with all conspiracy theory people. It simply doesn't work that way. You can't even get two people to agree on pizza toppings. There's no way you're going to get them to cooperate and agree on how to run the world, because they're competing against each other at the same time. And what this represents is a crisis in the U.S. political system. That the ruling elite are now being so wholly and completely incompetent because they're chasing that desperately falling rate of profitability. I mean, we all know that the next crisis is coming. We can all see it. And they know it too. And they're desperate to try to stave it off any way they can. And one of those ways is to try to get Donald Trump in to give more tax breaks. And they don't care what the consequences of that are. Here's a guy who's popular. He'll do what we want with the tax breaks and deregulation. Who cares about anything else? I'll let these people run around and think he's like there because Jesus wanted him there or some other dumb shit like that. It's just an inherent self-destructive nature of the system itself. Yeah, he's got a cult, a really, really useful cult. Because people are absolutely convinced he's not one of the elite. While those same people stand around and worship the very system that not only created that elite, but sustains them, and seeing no contradiction in what they're doing whatsoever. It's easy to pull the wool over their eyes, especially when they want to be fooled. They desperately want something to support that will magically fix everything without having to critique the system that caused it at all. And if there is anything that we've learned from criticizing capitalism, or when it comes to criticizing capitalism, people who support capitalism will believe anything. As it is with conspiracy theories, as I've said times before, it's anything but capitalism. The fault of everything that happens is anything but the system. It's always some evil pervading outside force. Oh, it's just this corrupt politician that does it. Oh, it's just the immigrants that are moving in. Or it's just there's always something. It is never the system itself. And that is whether you're liberal or you're conservative. Because liberals push it's just this corrupt person that's causing the problem. But the conservatives, it's always this evil outside pervading force that's causing it. It's always the communists, it's the Jews, it's the Mexicans, it's the Islamists, it's the anything. Or the secret communist Democrats. It's always that way, with never a real critique of how the system is actually fundamentally flawed to begin with. Because that's the point, is to keep that system at any cost. Even if it requires someone with more power, whose whole job is to hold the empire together, which, kind of was the point of the royal family in the UK for quite a long time. To keep everything running and keep the system afloat. Because those people in those positions genuinely believe that America has some kind of divine right to rule over the entire world. And that the entire world should just serve them. They truly believe that from the bottom of their heart. And that's why they're in the position that they're in. As in being in that powerful enough of a position. So to summarize, I think they were trying to get rid of Donald Trump, the system, the higher ups, were trying to get rid of Donald Trump by letting this guy shoot him. Because then they could turn around and say, we had nothing to do with this. There's no connection to the CIA or anyone else. And you can't prove any link because there is no link. And the reason they're doing this is because they are worried that Trump will be absolutely incompetent as president and they're going to have to assassinate him in a way that it's going to be really, really obvious that they did it, as opposed to letting some patsy do it. And the fact that he will destroy the last veneer of democracy that will die with him. Not with him dying, but his presidency will kill the last of that veneer where you could at least convince yourself that voting matters. The fact that anybody even believes voting matters or changes anything to this day is beyond me. But that was the reason why that happened. Because there's a severe crisis inside the ruling elite. Their own drive to fill their own pockets and keep their businesses afloat are antagonistic to the continuance of the system that gives them all that power to begin with. Thank you for watching. If you like this program, then please head over to my Patreon page and set up a monthly donation. It's your donations that keep this program running. Also, if you would like, please rate, comment, subscribe, and share in various social media.